Keith is my name. I work for a small to mid-sized corporation and am 36 years old. I ride my bike to work every day because I live close by. I reasoned that I might as well ride. Well, if I was going to, I therefore made a point to ride along the wide riverside after purchasing a road bike. Although I've completely fallen for the allure of riding, I used the riverbank path for another reason. It was due to a woman who was seated on a riverbank bench. About a month ago, I first laid eyes on her. I was using a different route, one that passes through this riverbank to get to work. I can see runners out on their morning jogs, which is a great way to unwind before work, and the breeze feels nice. As I glanced over the river, I was considering making this my regular route. At that moment, I noticed a woman seated on a bench. She was dressed in unusually light clothing for the season, even though it was October and getting colder. Despite her seeming coldness, she was absorbed in her knitting. I was first curious about what she was creating, but as soon as she started knitting a little, I knew right away that it was a heart-shaped piece. How did I find out? Because knitting hearts and I have a long and meaningful history together. My bike key still has the yarn heart mascot on it. Sarah Grant, my first girlfriend and love interest, gave it to me. It's a little worn out now, having been purchased more than 20 years ago. Sarah was my first girlfriend in middle school. I had the time of my life, even if our dates were mainly spent in parks or chatting for hours at a cheap diner because we were broke students. Sarah was really cute, with a round face that fit her short hair and charming dimples when she laughed. To get her to laugh, I did a lot of dumb things. Although it seems embarrassing now, I was very serious at the time. She was constantly cooperative and even brought me Valentine's Day chocolates that were handmade. I was really pleased, even though it didn't matter if I spent a lot of time in the bathroom and had a negative reaction to those chocolates. Although Sarah was good with her hands, she didn't appear to enjoy cooking, but she had excellent knitting skills. She was always knitting. Even in middle school, teachers would sometimes reprimand her or take away her supplies because she would bring her yarn to class and knit during breaks. She had knitted this heart specifically for me. I was much more thrilled when she gave me this heart mascot than when I got the Valentine's chocolates that day. I must have looked foolish because I was smiling so much, but it made Sarah laugh. For me, everything about Sarah was new. Our first date, our first present, and our first kiss. I truly believed that we would be together forever since I truly loved her. We snuck out to talk in the park late at night. We were even apprehended by the police. We couldn't stay together, but I still cherish every moment I spent with her. Sarah had to change schools after a year of dating, and it was in a different state, which was difficult for a student like me to travel to. Cell phones weren't common among students back then, and not everyone had one. We definitely wrote to each other, promising as I tearfully saw her off. I wrote letters every week, and at first, Sarah responded, but gradually her replies slowed and eventually stopped altogether. I tried sending more letters, but they never reached Sarah, and finally, they got returned to me. Our relationship, strained by the distance, fizzled out without even a proper breakup. Those memories randomly came back to me while I was riding my road bike on the way home from work. She's there, knitting on the riverbank. Even when it's time for me to head back, she's finished with the heart-shaped knitting. I stop my bike to watch, wondering what she'll make next. Maybe it's plain curiosity, or perhaps I see a bit of Sarah in her. After all, the only woman I'd ever seen knitting was Sarah. But the woman suddenly started unraveling the knitted heart. She had finished it. "What a waste!" I exclaimed, genuinely thinking it was such a waste after all the effort she put into it. I've always seen her engrossed in her knitting, head down, so I never really saw her face, but she seemed to have a sad expression. I felt a little uneasy, but she and I were total strangers after all. I was just observing her without any real connection, thinking I should get moving on my road bike. A strong gust of wind blew, and I braced myself to avoid falling. But the king I got from Sarah broke off due to wear and tear, rolling down toward the riverside. Whoa! Hey, wait! I shouted. To make matters worse, it didn't roll onto the grass, but down a staircase, gaining momentum and making it hard to stop. In a panic, I jumped off my bike and ran down the riverside. I couldn't lose the precious gift from Sarah. In that rush of emotion, I yelled out loud. It was when I looked up after catching the mascot, which luckily stopped near the bottom of the stairs. I caught her eye when she turned towards me at the sound of my loud voice. The first expression I saw on her, though she was skinny and her hair had grown out, was that she looked just like Sarah. Sarah! I gasped softly, eyes wide. Her face seemed to ask, "How do you know my name?" Then her eyes shifted to the mascot in my grasp. "No way, is that you, Keith?" Her recognition confirmed to me that she was indeed Sarah, and I found myself frozen for a moment. Well, of course I thought she looked similar, but I didn't think she was the real deal. "Long time no see. You don't look well, though." I knew I had to say something, anything, so I forced out the words. But it seemed I had stepped on a landmine. Sarah smiled, her head bowed. "Oh yeah, a bit of a rough patch." The reunion after such a long time felt awkward. Thinking to break the ice as evening approached, I decided to walk her home. Maybe, like old times, we could chat about the past if we walked home together. We might be able to share some old stories. But then I heard Sarah's bombshell. "I don't have a home." The cozy atmosphere turned super awkward. Caught off guard, I blurted out, "What do you mean you don't have a home?" "What?" A spur-of-the-moment question. Sarah, with a self-deprecating tone, confessed, "Actually, after I moved, my parents got divorced. Neither of them wanted to take me in, so I ended up in a facility. It's tough to get a decent job with just a high school diploma. Now I'm living in a cheap place, picking up odd jobs here and there." She said this while staring at her yarn. I realized then that Sarah must be struggling financially, unable to afford new yarn. That's why she's been unraveling old pieces. Her light clothing wasn't a fashion choice. It was all she had. "Did you stop sending letters because you went to that facility?" I asked. "Yeah, things were hectic, and I couldn't take your letters, Keith. I didn't know your address, so I couldn't send any." "I'm so sorry," she admitted, still looking downcast. I just wanted to see Sarah smile again, like in the old days. Even if our connection had naturally faded, I still cared for her. I still loved her. I just wanted her, someone I have feelings for, to be happy. "Listen, Sarah, if it's okay, could you make this again?" I asked, handing her the worn-out heart-shaped mascot. "I'll buy the materials. You've kept this thing I gave you." "Haha, am I really good enough?" She laughed, a bit surprised and touched. "I want it." "Because it's you who made it," I replied. Sarah, at that, gave a modest, happy smile. Since then, Sarah started knitting my mascot again at a bench by the riverside. I'd buy whatever she told me to get and hand it to her. I considered going with her, but I didn't want her to worry about the cost, so I just handed her what I bought. In the mornings I could do little more than greet her, but I made sure to stop by Sarah's place on my way home to talk, even for a bit. The conversations were always about the past, about things we did in our club activities or embarrassing ourselves by hitting the wrong note during a singing contest. For us, the only common ground was those old stories, but that was enough because Sarah started to smile a little more. 2 weeks later, Sarah made a stunning heart-shaped mascot for me. It's clear she's improved her skills. Her mascots used to be just plain pink, but now they have red patterns on them and look much cuter. Well, this looks like something you could buy in a store, I said. Oh, come on, it's not that great, she replied. But the mascot I attached to my road bike was very popular at work. I want one like this. Where did you buy this? It was particularly popular among the female employees. I spontaneously thought that if Sarah sold the one she made, she could make a living off of it. Nowadays, people thrive selling handmade items online. With some yarn, Sarah's creations would definitely sell. I was sure of it, partly because of my business intuition. So when I suggested this to Sarah, she replied, I can't do it. Why not? It was a hit with the women at work. The problem is, I don't have an address, she said. It hit me then. Even if she made and sold the products without a permanent address, there would be no place to list for returns. She would be in a bind if there was a mistake or a return. I wish I could make a living off of knitting too, but reality is tough. How about renting an address? I suggested. Sarah, looking downcast, replied, many people these days don't want to use their home address, so there are services where you can rent one monthly. She was surprised I didn't know that, but then said, I don't have the money. I'll cover the costs for materials and such. Once you make a profit, you can save it and eventually rent your own place. But I don't want to trouble you. Hey, how about this? Think of it as a business deal. I believe your knitting will be a hit. It's not just about helping you because I love you. I'm truly in awe of Sarah's talent and want the world to see it. I'm willing to support you financially to make that happen. Finally, Sarah agreed, saying she'd want to try it for a year. If she doesn't see results in a year, she'll quit. With that understanding, I supported her. Under that promise, I stepped in to support Sarah. But honestly, I had underestimated the situation. I was hoping that Sarah's knitting would gain traction maybe around 6 months in. But Sarah's knitted goods started flying off the shelves almost instantly. It all began with her setting up a stall at a local flea market, where her knitted items, especially earrings and scarves made with yarn, garnered a lot of attention. Thanks to this, her reputation grew. When she participated in paid craft fairs, she made a decent profit. Of course, I helped out at the events, but Sarah is just amazing. She participates in events every month and yet never runs out of stock, always producing new items. I often wondered, how can she knit this fast and maintain this quality? It seems like she also started advertising on social media. Apparently, she began taking custom knitting orders online. She especially became a hit with moms wanting knit items for their children. Sarah is always busy knitting. Once she had saved up a decent amount of money, she could afford to buy clothes, and Sarah became noticeably more lively. She had been a bit too skinny after all. Now, when she smiles, dimples form, making her look just like she used to. In just 6 months, Sarah became a handmade crafts artist who made a significant profit. She could purchase her own materials and no longer needed to stay in. Now she's living with me. About 3 months after she started selling her knit crafts, it honestly became more convenient for her to hold event meetings and get some assistance with delivery at my place. That's the official reason, at least. Sarah said she'd be fine living with me. After the promised year passed, I took the plunge and proposed. She laughed and said, "We're pretty much like a married couple already," and gladly accepted. We've discussed having a wedding once things slow down a bit, since Sarah is quite busy with her handmade orders. But to be honest, I just want her to finish her current crafts. After all, there are so many knitted items in our house waiting to be sold. I even built a shelf myself to help organize things, on the very night she moved in, no less. Instead of a traditional wedding night, I was doing some DIY work for Sarah. It had been a while since I did something like this, and honestly, I struggled. Seeing my efforts, she tilted her head and asked, "Have trouble fitting it in?" She said that because she noticed several bent and unusable nails around me. "I just can't seem to get it right. Why does it keep bending?" "Why not try holding it firmly and give it another go?" I took Sarah's advice and tried again, but I messed up about 7 times. The shelf I finally made turned out to be quite handy, but it seems we might need another one soon, or there won't be any room left to walk. Never thought I'd be surrounded by so much yarn. I used to glance at the wall and saw an old worn-out heart-shaped mascot Sarah made for me and a new one she had crafted recently. A question popped into my head. I've always wondered, why did you choose to make mascots out of knitting? It's three-dimensional and seems quite difficult. By now, Sarah crafts them effortlessly, but back then, stuffing them with cotton must have been a challenge. As I pondered, Sarah, still knitting, said with a chuckle, "Who knows? Why don't you look it up yourself?" So I did some research on mascots and understood her point. A mascot is a person, animal, or object believed to bring good luck. She gifted me the heart mascot hoping to bring me good fortune. Maybe it's thanks to this mascot that I'm living such a blessed life now. It might even be the reason we got back together. Truly, it brought me so much luck. As I thought this, I lovingly washed it. "On your anniversary, bring your wife here. She'll surely love it." That's what my mother said in my memory. I've carried it in my heart all these years. "Hey, Bobby, how's the concrete?" "Yeah, I'm on it." "My name's Bobby. I'm turning 35 this year. I've been working in construction for a good while now. Man, it's hot today." I took a moment looking up at the sky. I met my wife Kate on a day just as hot. It's been a bit over 10 years since I met her as a newbie. Has it really been that long? Perhaps now is the perfect time to take her to that fancy diner. I remember the restaurant. My mother always cherished it. It will always be in my memory. When I was 10, my dad, whom I dearly loved, passed away from terminal cancer. His sudden absence hit hard back then. "How about we go somewhere nice one day?" Mom suggested and took me to a French restaurant. It had a solemn atmosphere with counter seats. "Mom, we're eating here," I asked nervously, as it was my first time in such a place. "This is where your dad proposed to me." "Wow, so it's a special place for you and Dad." "Yes, honey. Today marks our 10th wedding anniversary. That's why we're here." She smiled warmly. Afterward, while eating the many delicious dishes that came out, I asked her about her memories of my father. We talked about many things, which made me feel happy for the first time in a long time. "When you have your anniversary, bring your future wife here. She'll surely appreciate it." On our way home, Mom shared those words. The mention of a future wife made me blush, but her words stuck with me. Even as I grew up, many years passed since then. Before I realized it, we were celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary. I want to visit that place with my wife, Kate. Kate prefers Italian cuisine, but would she enjoy a French meal? No, I'm sure she'll be fine. No one could resist those dishes. "Hey, Bobby, quit daydreaming. You're slacking." "Sorry." I snapped back to reality and resumed my work. 10 years ago, while working just like this, Kate approached me. "Excuse me, are you the guy from back then?" she suddenly asked. "Huh, who are you?" "Oh, I'm sorry. I mistook you for someone else. You look like someone I knew, but it's a memory from when I was little, so please don't mind it." "What do you mean?" "Well, actually, for some reason, I became curious and wanted to know more." It turns out the man was someone who had done a huge favor for Kate when she was younger. "I called out to you because you look so familiar," she said, looking embarrassed. This chance encounter led us to exchange contact info, and a few months later, we started dating and eventually got married. However, Kate never told me what exactly happened between her and that man back in the day. She said it was a precious memory and that she couldn't share the story. I was curious, but I figured it would be weird to press her about it now. She'll probably tell me someday, I thought. I needed to focus on preparing for our anniversary. "A fancy restaurant. Is it really that good?" "It's amazing. My mom took me there once, and I hadn't found a place that can compare." "If your mother-in-law says it's good, I bet it's a fantastic place. I'm looking forward to it." "Then, will you come with me?" "Of course. If you recommend it that highly, I'm excited. It's sure to give us wonderful memories." Seeing Kate's happy face filled me with anticipation. Truth be told, my mother passed away before Kate and I got married, but I'm sure she's celebrating our anniversary up in heaven. I couldn't help but smile, imagining her joyful face. On the day of our anniversary, I rushed straight to the restaurant after a meeting. "Hey, Kate. I'm sorry the meeting with the client ran late." "It's okay, I'll wait for you here." I didn't have time to go back to the office, so I rushed straight to the reserved restaurant. I had planned to dress up in a nice suit for our special day, but it didn't work out. Upon arriving at the restaurant, I approached the hostess. "Excuse me, I had a reservation under the name Bobby." "Welcome," she said, but her smile quickly faded as she raised her brows. "Excuse me, but what are you wearing? Is there something wrong with what I'm wearing?" "Well, are you wearing work clothes?" I was taken aback by her unexpected remark. "Yes, it's my work attire, but it's for sales, not construction, so it's clean." The hostess looked even more displeased. "Is there a problem?" I asked. She looked shocked. "Certainly, it's work attire, but not for construction work, so it's clean." I don't recall getting such a displeased look. "Sorry, but we don't have any tables available today," the hostess said with a stern expression. "Wait a minute. What's the deal? We made a reservation." Kate confronted the hostess. "Our restaurant is fully booked with wealthy clientele," the hostess retorted. With a glance to the side, I could see Kate trembling with anger. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, Kate said, "If it's okay for us to take this to the Customer Advisory Center, then by all means, kick us out. Your restaurant's reputation will plummet." At Kate's assertive remark, the hostess looked taken aback. "I understand. I'll consult with the owner," she reluctantly said and disappeared toward the entrance. "What's with this place?" I muttered. "I'm sorry. It wasn't like this when I visited years ago." "I get it. The management changed, and so did the vibe of the place." I felt a pang in my heart at my wife's words. Indeed, the current manager is the previous owner's son. Ever since he took over, I'd heard the reputation wasn't good. Hearing stories of them being picky with customers and having a bad attitude, I thought they were just rumors, but I can't believe how openly rude they are to customers. Lost in thought, the hostess returned. "It was an oversight on our part. We sincerely apologize. Please allow me to show you to your table. You said earlier there were no reservations available. What's up with that?" Kate snapped at the hostess, who responded with a raised eyebrow. "You want your food, right? Our restaurant is always fully booked. Follow me to your table," the hostess said coldly. It reminded me of a grumpy but skilled old sushi chef I saw on TV. Maybe this place has a similar vibe. "Kate, let's just sit for now. I said, holding back my rising anger. We followed the hostess to the counter. The interior hasn't changed much since I was a kid, however. The chef behind the counter looked clearly displeased. With a scowl, he began placing dishes in front of us. The food looked delicious, yet it didn't stimulate my appetite. "What's wrong? Not eating?" asked Kate as I tasted the dish. It was certainly delicious, but there was a lingering odd sensation. "What's this feeling?" I thought as I continued eating. Suddenly, Kate spoke up. "How can you serve this to customers? What's with the hygiene standards of this place?" "What are you talking about?" The chef's face contorted with irritation. Kate continued glaring at him. "The crispiness of the batter is clearly not fresh. It's been left out at room temperature for too long, right? It's lost its color and firm texture." At her observation, the chef's eyes widened. My wife, listening on the side, hadn't lost her sharp tongue. I was impressed. "That's just your opinion. Where's your proof? Isn't it obvious just by looking at this dish?" "Well, it doesn't matter. I'll have our experienced journalist from our magazine come and secretly review your restaurant, and I'm sure they'll write an article that echoes my sentiments." "An article? You can't be serious." Both the restaurant owner and the hostess turned pale in an instant. Little did they know, Kate was a food critic for a gourmet magazine. "I came here today hoping to savor the nostalgic taste my husband always talked about, but both the service and the taste were a letdown. It's really disappointing, but I believe my husband is even more devastated than I am. Are you prepared for the backlash to your poor service and food?" With a cold stare at the restaurant staff, Kate put down her fork. "Let's go. I'll cover the bill. If we stay here any longer, our wedding anniversary will turn into a disaster." "I get it, but I brought you here." "Let me pay. In that case, I'll take you up on your offer. We still have some dishes coming out, but we'll eat elsewhere." "Thank you." After saying that to the hostess, Kate got up from her seat. I also stood up and headed toward the cashier. "Wait, hold on," I said. "No need for change." I laid several hundred bills on the counter and left the restaurant. I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. As soon as we were out, I apologized to Kate. "I'm sorry for making you go through that. More importantly, are you okay? Must have been a shock to see your mother-in-law's favorite place like that." "Oh, I have a place I want to take you." "A place you want to take me?" I asked, surprised. "You'll surely create good memories there," she replied. She guided me to a small diner located near the other restaurant, where I was greeted by a familiar face. "Welcome. Is that the guy from that time?" I wondered. Though he had aged, there were traces of resemblance on his face. It was the gentleman who served us dishes when my mother and I visited the diner, the previous owner of that restaurant. Kate whispered. He handed over the main restaurant to his son and continued his business here. "Really, sir?" I asked. "The usual, please," he replied with a grin. "Gotcha. Young lady, you want the salmon platter, right?" The former owner gave Kate a wide grin. "Young lady," he said, and I felt a sense of déjà vu hearing Kate being addressed that way. I had encountered a similar scene in the past. "Oh, that time. Did you finally remember?" Kate's voice was full of excitement. "I'm so glad you finally remembered," she exclaimed. Turns out, there was more to the restaurant memory at that place. While having a meal with my mother, a little girl had been intently watching our food. She seemed to be alone with no parents in sight. Wondering what was going on, I looked her way. In a faint voice, she said, "Well, that food looks so yummy." Apparently, she was dining in the only private room available with her father. However, they only ordered alcohol and snacks, so she was getting hungry. He only orders stuff like fries. Plus, he gets drunk and won't wake up, so I get really hungry. She spoke with tears just forming in her eyes. I felt an urge to do something for her. Are you okay? Hungry? You can eat this. I offered her my plate. Really? Are you sure? Thank you so much. She eagerly started eating the stew and tan. Afterward, the previous owner, who had observed the interaction, treated her to a complimentary meal. I clearly remembered her happily eating the food. Why had I forgotten about it? No way, I whispered. Kate, was that you back then? I never forgot how kind you were to me, she said. I recognized you right away when I saw you. The scar on your forehead, I could never forget. I had a large scar on my forehead from a bicycle accident when I was a kid. I was so happy to see you again, but you never noticed me. I decided to stay quiet until you remembered. That's why I never mentioned it. Seeing Kate's innocent laughter made my heart warm. I can't believe I married that girl from back then. I never thought I'd marry the kind man from that day. The meal at that restaurant was honestly terrible, but let's make it up here. Let's give you the best hospitality. The previous owner smiled warmly. Yes, please, I replied with a smile. After that, we enjoyed a delicious meal. Just as I remembered, maybe because of the earlier unpleasant experience, it felt even more delightful. Who would have thought that boy from back then would grow up so well? The head chef seemed to remember the incident well. It feels like a dream to be eating the chef's food together again. Kate joyfully ate the dishes prepared by the previous owner. It felt so good, like I had finally fulfilled what my mother always said. Sorry for the unpleasant experience my sons caused you. My apologies. The chef bowed deeply. It's not your fault, please don't worry about it, I reassured him. Raising his head, the previous owner continued, Actually, I have a favor to ask. Ever since they took over the restaurant, they've become arrogant, even to regular customers. The reputation of the diner has plummeted. Can you help teach them a lesson? Is that really okay? Kate asked, looking slightly pleased. Yes, it's fine. I don't want the diner's reputation to get any worse. With your help, please do what you think is best. Understood, Kate answered with a beaming smile. I hope she doesn't go overboard, I thought to myself, but seeing her smile gave me a good feeling. A few weeks later, the diner received a scathing review in a gourmet magazine where Kate was in charge. Because of the prominent criticism, it seemed the diner lost all its customers. Later, it seemed the place was on the brink of shutting down but was acquired by someone else. Seeing a place with so many memories face such hardships is a bit bittersweet. I guess so, but the new owner seems to be a very nice person, and he's carrying on the taste of the original owner. I went there on business the other day, and the place looked so much better. It made me nostalgic. Nostalgic? Kate asked. It had the same vibe as the place where we first met. Hey, in a few years, should we take our child there too? That sounds nice, but with a little one, we might be a bother. Maybe in about 10 years, I said, gently patting Kate's belly as I spoke. Going to that restaurant might be a long way off, but the idea of taking our child to a place filled with so many cherished memories is something to look forward to. I wonder what kind of future we will have built by then. With that thought, I gave a soft chuckle.